biology is a study of living organisms, and therefore we need to understand the characteristics of living organisms. What are the characteristics that are there? What are the characteristics of living organisms? Characteristics, we are looking at what can make you identify or say this is the living organisms. Okay? So the characteristics of living organisms are summarized by the mnemonic Mr. Graphic. Okay? MRGREFI. Now, what is the meaning, or what does each letter stand for? So let us start with the C. What is C? So C is cells. Then what about I? I is irritability. So irritability. Then what about F? So F is feeding or nutrition. Feeding or nutrition. How about E? So E is excretion. What about R? There are two of them. So whichever you start with, it's okay. So reproduction. For first R, I'll put reproduction. Then what about G? So G is growth. Then respiration. Then finally M. What about M? So M for movement. Movement. Okay, so these are characteristics of living organisms. So the first one, we are saying cells. Then the second one, coming from this side, the second one, irritability or sensitivity. So I is irritability. Let me write it here. Irritability, like this. Or sensitivity. So that is I. Then the second one, we are looking at feeding or nutrition. So feeding or nutrition. Then this one, excretion, reproduction, growth, respiration, and movement. So if you want to master these characteristics of living organisms, simply you just master the mnemonic Mr. Graphic. And you need to know that C is for cells, I for irritability or sensitivity, F is for feeding or nutrition, E is excretion, R is reproduction, G is growth, R again respiration, and M for movement. Now let us look at each of these. So now we are starting with movement. So what is movement? What is movement? So when something is moving, movement from moving. So all living organisms, they do move. Now what is movement? So it's the process by which living organisms change location. So when when an organism is able to change location, changing of location and posture without external force. okay, without being forced or compelled to move. It moves on its own. That is what it means. When it moves on its own, then there's movement, okay? And that can only be a characteristic of a living organism. Because take, for example, if you leave a stone, it can stay there for years until you move it. But when you leave a living organism, let's say an insect, by the time you come back, you find that it has moved and it has changed a location and, of course, the posture. And therefore, this one being the characteristic of living organism. So when something is able to move on its own without being compelled to move, then it's a living organism. Okay? Let us look at the second one, which is respiration. What is respiration? What is respiration? So this is just a release of energy from food substance. Release of energy from food substances inside the living cells. So, living organisms are able to respire. So, we are able to release energy from the food substance that we eat. So, when you eat food, and I'm sure you've experienced this, when you feel hungry, what happens? You lose energy, you become weak. But immediately you eat, you find that you gain energy. Where does that energy come from? That energy comes from the food that we eat. But how do we derive, or how do we get the energy from the food that we eat? It's through respiration. So, after the food is digested, it is absorbed in the bloodstream and it goes into the cell. Respiration takes place in the cells. Okay? And there are two types of respiration that we should take note. One is called aerobic respiration. So types of respiration, we are looking at aerobic respiration. And the second one is anaerobic. Okay? Anaerobic. Let me just clean up here. So we are saying respiration is the process by which energy is released from the food substance in the living cells. Okay? So energy is released from the food that we eat. And now there are two types of respiration. That is one, aerobic, and the second one is anaerobic. Okay? Aerobic and anaerobic. Anaerobic. Respiration. So we have two types of respiration. That is aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Now, what happens in aerobic respiration? So now, since we are looking at release of energy from the food substance, okay? So, aerobic respiration is a release of energy from the food substance in the presence of oxygen. So, the cells require oxygen for them to release energy. So during the process of aerobic respiration, oxygen is required, okay, to release energy. On the other hand, anaerobic respiration is a release of energy from the food substances and does not require the use of oxygen. So the release of energy from the food substance in absence of oxygen. Release of energy from the food substances inside the living cells in absence of oxygen. Okay, that is anaerobic respiration. And if we are to compare the amount of energy that is produced aerobic respiration produce high amount of energy. On the other hand, anaerobic respiration produce a small amount of energy. Okay, so let us look at the next one, which is growth. So what is growth? What is growth? So you should take note that all living organisms, since this one is the characteristics of living organisms, so all living organisms should be able to grow. Now, what does it mean? So growth is a permanent. So growth is a permanent increase. One, in size, mass, number of cells, and complexity of an organism. So it's a permanent increase in size, mass, a number of cells, and complexity of an organism. So an organism, a living organism, should be able to increase in size, the mass should be able to increase, then the number of cells increases also in the body, and also the complexity. We are looking at this one means that the organism should be able to do certain functions that they are not able to do in their early stage. They are becoming complex. Okay, so that is the characteristic of this shows that an organism is living if there's growth. Okay, the other one that we can look at is reproduction. So all living organisms are able to reproduce. Now, what is reproduction? So reproduction is just a process by which living organisms produce their young ones. So the process by which living organisms produce their young ones is called reproduction. Basically, there are two types of reproduction. One, sexual reproduction, and asexual. So, sexual and asexual reproduction, there are two types of reproduction. Now, what is sexual reproduction? So, sexual reproduction, it involves the fusion of male and female gametes. Female gamete. So the fusion of male and female gamete is what we call sexual reproduction. This male and female gamete can be from one or two parents, and they produce an offspring that is different. So an offspring produced is different from the parents. So you should take note of that. Sexual reproduction is just a fusion of male and female gamete. And of course, these male and female gamete might be from one organism or from different or two parents. And what is produced is called an offspring that can be or that is different from the parents. Whereas in asexual reproduction, this is the fusion of male and female gamete. So here you are looking at fusion of male and female gamete. But they are from same parent. So one parent. produce female and male gamete. And when they fuse, they form, or an offspring that is produced is not different from the parent. There's no variation. So the organism, the offspring become same to the parents. By the way, the offspring is just a young one. So what is produced is what we call the offspring. So that is asexual reproduction. Let us look at the next one, which is excretion. So all living organisms should be able to excrete. Now, what is excretion? So excretion is just a removal of toxic, metabolic waste. So the metabolic waste, they are removed from the body by the process called excretion. So it's a removal of toxic or harmful metabolic waste from the cells of the body. What are some of the examples of waste that are removed? We have urea, excess salt, excess water, biopigment, and carbon dioxide. These are some of the waste products that are removed through excretion. And we are going to look at excretory organs as we go on in our study of biology. Let us look at the next one, which is feeding. Feeding or nutrition. So now, what is feeding or what is nutrition? So please bear in mind that this word is not nutrient, it's nutrition. It's not nutrient. Of course, nutrient, you think of something that we eat, but this is nutrition. So what is nutrition? So nutrition is just a process by which organisms obtain their food. Okay? Process by which organisms or living organisms obtain their food. How do organisms obtain their food? So, in terms of nutrition, organisms can be classified into two. So, in terms of how they obtain their food, organisms are classified into two. One, or these are some of the classes of organisms in terms of nutrition. So, autotroph. So we have those we call autotrophic and heterotrophic. So we have autotrophic and heterotrophic. So now, what is autotrophic before we come to organisms that obtain food through autotroph? So autotrophic nutrition has to do with organisms that are able to make their own food. So those that can make their own food are called autotrophs. So organisms that are able to make their own food are the ones that feed autotrophically. So what are some of the examples of organisms that are able to make their own food? Plants. So plants make their own food through the process of photosynthesis and using the raw material that is water and carbon dioxide. So the process of photosynthesis. So they are able to make their own food through the process of photosynthesis. And therefore, plants are examples of organisms that feed autotrophically. Okay? The other, on heterotroph, we are looking at organisms that depends on already made food. So for these depend on food that are already made. Okay? Examples, animals. Animals will depend on the food that plant make, and therefore being heterotrophic. Okay? Let us look at the next one, which is sensitivity or irritability. What is sensitivity? So sensitivity, from the word sensitive. What is sensitivity? So the ability to detect, sensitivity is just the ability to detect, stimuli. Okay? You are able to detect stimuli, which means someone is sensitive, and living organisms are sensitive because they are able to detect stimuli. Stimuli is plural, singular is stimulus. Now, what is stimuli, or what is stimulus? Stimuli is the change in the environment. Okay? The change in the environment. So organisms or living organisms are able to detect the change in their environment. It could be the change in temperature, the change in pressure, and all that. That is being sensitive. So all the living organisms, they have the characteristics of sensitivity. Okay? The other one that we can look at is cells. So what is a cell? It's a basic unit of living organisms. This means that all living organisms, they come from, or they start as just a cell. Okay, so cells, a build-up of cells, specialization of cells is what makes up a living organism. Okay, now let us now look at the differences between living and non-living organisms. So under living organisms, or characteristics of living organisms, we said, one, they are sensitive, they do move, they do reproduce. So now, if we are to look at non-living organisms, they are not living, which means the difference is that living organisms, they do move. So in living organisms, there's movement. On the other hand, in non-living organisms, no movement. So if we differentiate the two, you say living organisms, they do move, whereas non-living organisms, they do not move. Remember, movement, we are talking about organisms being able to move without being compelled to. So without application of external force, supposed to move on its own. Then also, reproduction. Living organisms, they reproduce. Non-living organisms do not reproduce. Okay? The other one that we can look at is excretion. Living organisms, they are able to excrete. Non-living organisms do not. Excrete. So it's just the opposite of what we've looked at, the opposite of what living organisms, the characteristics of living organisms. Those are characteristics of non-living organisms. Okay? So you can go on and look at what are some of the characteristics, and those characteristics of living organisms or non-living organisms, they do not apply. Okay. Let us now look at the processes of living organisms in terms of metabolism or metabolic reaction. So, Let us start first by understanding what metabolic these metabolic reactions are. So metabolic reactions, metabolic reaction is just a sum of chemical reactions. So the sum of chemical reactions that takes place inside living cells. So there are two types of metabolic reaction that take place inside the cell. Types of metabolic reaction that take place inside the cell. One is called anabolic. And the other one is called catabolic. So two types of metabolic reactions, we have anabolic and catabolic reaction. Let us start by looking at anabolic reaction. So what is anabolic reaction? So it's a type of metabolic reaction where large and complex molecules are synthesized from simple and small molecules, are synthesized from simple or small and simple molecules. So this to mean that it involves the building up of large molecules from simple molecules. Examples of anabolic reaction that involves synthesizing a large molecule into a large one, protein synthesis. The protein is made up of the basic unit, which are amino acids. Different types of amino acids. There are different types of amino acids, and these amino acids combine or join to form a protein. So it's from the smaller molecules that is where proteins are built. Okay, proteins are built from smaller molecules or basic unit called amino acids. Synthesis and protein synthesis are examples of anabolism. What about catabolism? What is catabolism reaction, or what is catabolic reaction? So catabolic reaction is where now it's the opposite of anabolism. So here the large and complex molecule is broken down into small and simpler molecules. So that is catabolism. So in terms of example, we can look at the enzyme breaking down large molecule into smaller ones. So work of enzymes to break down large molecules into a smaller one. Okay, so that is catabolism. So catabolism just simply means breaking down. So if you have the large molecule and it's broken down into small. So having discussed the characteristics of living organisms, let us now look at one of the characteristics of living organism, which is cell. We said living organisms, they have cells, and by definition we said a cell is just a basic unit of living organism, or each living organism has a cell. Now in this topic we are going to focus mainly to look at the cell structure and organization. Cells are very small in such a way that they cannot be seen by our naked eyes, and therefore we need an instrument to look at or to view the cells. And the instrument that is needed for us to examine or to study cells is called microscope. So this type of microscope is called the compound microscope. So this is the diagram of a compound microscope. Okay, so in study of cells, since they are very small to be viewed by our naked eyes, we need to use an instrument called the microscope. So the microscope is just an instrument that is used to examine cells or small things that cannot be seen with our naked eyes, and cells happen to be one of things that are observed under a microscope. So if you look at the microscope, this is a structure. So it has the eyepiece, it has the body tube, revolving nose, objective, condenser, mirror base, inclination joint, fine adjusting knob, and coarse adjusting knob. Now your task is to go and look at what is the function. Okay, so give the function of each part of a compound microscope. So you are going to give the functions of each part. Okay, we can now look at the simple structure of a cell. So now, under the study of a cell, let us start by looking at the simple structure of a cell. So the simple structure and the function. So this is the simple structure of a plant and animal cell. So in our study, since we are saying in our study we are going normally to focus, in this study we are normally going to focus on plant and animal cell. Okay, so this is the simple structure of plants and animal, or plant and animal cell. So now, what are the parts of a simple structure? So the parts of a simple cell, the outer part here is called the cell wall. So this outer part is called the cell wall. This is the one that is the cell wall. Then we have the green part here. So this one is a plant. This one is a plant cell, please. It's a plant cell. And this is an animal cell. So in terms of, if we are to label the part, this is the cell wall, and this is the chloroplast, as it is labeled there. Chloroplast are a plant cell that are this side. But there are also other parts. So these are the parts that are different from animal cell, that are not found in animal cell, as we are going to look at the differences as we go on. So these parts, take note of them. So we are still labeling the cell. So here the inside part is the cell membrane. So this is the cell membrane. Okay, this is the cell membrane, and right here inside, the whole inner part here is what we call the cytoplasm. The watery part here inside is the cytoplasm, as it is labeled here. And we have the cell membrane labeled here. This is the nucleus. So this is a nucleus. On the animal cell, we also have the nucleus, which is this one. We have the cytoplasm, which is the inner part here. And we have the cell membrane. So this is the simple, this is a simple structure of plant and animal cell. Okay? So it's the simple structure of plants and animal cell. Now let us look at the similarities between plant and animal cell. What are the similarities that are there in terms of the parts that they have? So if you look at this simple structure, still we are looking at the simple structure of the cell. If you look at this simple structure of the cell, you find that these that are in blue, which means they are common. These that are in blue are common. Okay? So all the plants, I mean all the cells, that is both plant and animal cells, have these parts. So the similarity is that both plant and animal cell have these parts. What are the parts? So the animal cell and the plant cell, they both have a cell membrane. The plant cell and animal cell, they both have the cytoplasm. Plant cell and animal cell, they both have the nucleus. So this is the similarity that is there in between the two. Okay, so you can look at it in terms of the Venn diagram. If I were to present them in terms of the Venn diagram, it will be like this. Okay, now here we are going to still continue as we go on. You are going to find that more parts, they have more parts in common. So one of them that we've looked at, some of them that we've looked at here is the cell membrane. So all of them, they have a cell membrane. So that's why they are appearing here in the intersection section here. If this is a set and this is a set. So they both have nucleus. So we've looked at both have nucleus, both have cell membrane, both have cytoplasm. So far we have three parts that are common. But what about those parts that are not common? So those parts that are not common, one of them is the chloroplast. So the chloroplast is only found in plant cell. Okay, this is plant cell and this is animal cell. So the chloroplast is only found in plant cell and it contains chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is the pigment that is used by plants to trap light energy during a process of photosynthesis. So animal cells do not need chloroplast. Okay, what do animals need chlorophyll for? Okay, so they do not have chloroplast. The vacuole, so in plant cell here, you see there's a vacuole. In animal cell, if the vacuole is there, they're not permanent vacuoles. They disappear at some point, okay, and small in size. But here you are seeing this large vacuole and it's permanent, okay? And the component of this one, it contains the cell sap, salt, water, all that. Then the cell wall. The plant cell has a cell wall. So the cell wall is the outer part of the plant cell. Animal cells do not have the cell wall. Okay? So these are some of the similarities that are there. So these that we've looked at so far. So they both have the nucleus, they both have the cell membrane, they both have the mitochondria, as we are going to see when we look at the detailed one. They both have the ER, endoplasmic reticulum, they both have the Golgi bodies, okay? But in terms of, so they both have this. Can we now look at the differences? So the same diagrams, I'll use them. This is animal cell, and this is plant cell. So the differences, we are looking at what they do not have in common. So if you look at this one, these are the parts that they do not have in common. So they do not have, the plant cell has the cell wall. So if you are asked to write the difference, distinguish between a plant and animal cell, this is what you write. Okay, so one, plant cell has cell wall, whereas animal cells do not have. So plant cell has cell wall, while animal cells do not have. Okay. The second difference that we can talk about is in terms of chloroplast. So plant cells or plant cell has chloroplast, whereas animal cell do not have. Okay? 3, we can say plant cell has large and permanent vacuum, whereas animal cells, they only have the vacuum during the early development. They might have some small vacuums that might disappear at some point. So animal cells do not, whereas animal cells do not have vacuum. Okay. Then the other one we can talk about in terms of shape. So in terms of shape, animal cell, or let me say plant cell, is regular or are regular in shape, whereas animal cell is irregular. Okay, irregular or are irregular in shape. So these are some of the 4 differences that are there, or these are some of the differences that are there between plant cell and animal cell. So all these, so irregular shape, so in terms of shape here, add shape, okay, in terms of shape. Okay. So having looked at the simple structure of both plant and animal cell, and the differences, the similarities between them, and also the differences between them, can we now look at, or let us now look at the detailed structure of a plant and animal cell. So, in looking at the detailed structure of plant and animal cell, we still have the parts that we've looked at so far that we are familiar with. One of the parts that we've looked at under the simple structure of the cell was the cell membrane. So still in the detailed one, we have the cell membrane. The other one, we have the cytoplasm, and also we have the nucleus. That is what we've looked at so far. Under plant cell here, we have the nucleus, we have the cell wall, we have the cell membrane, we have the vacuole, we have the chloroplast. So these are the parts that we've looked at under a simple one. Let us now look at the detailed structure of animal cells and plant cell. So now, since we've looked at the simple structure of a plant and animal cell, and the parts that are there that are common, we have the cell membrane, of which we said both they have cell membrane, nucleus, and cytoplasm. But in terms of their differences, you find that in terms of their differences, we said animal cells do not have the cell wall, do not have the vacuole. Okay, if they are there, then they are small. Do not have a chloroplast. So now let us add to what we've learned. Let us now look at the detailed structure. So the detailed structure that you are seeing is the one that is seen, that is viewed under a high power microscope. So this is what you are able to see when you want to look at under high power microscope. So this is the detailed part of animal, so the detailed animal cell, and this is the detailed plant cell. So you can see in terms of structures, in terms of parts, we have new parts now that we can talk about. That is the Golgi body. One of the parts that is there, that is the Golgi body here. The Golgi bodies or Golgi apparatus. Okay, we have the mitochondria. We have the ribosomes. We have the endoplasmic reticulum. We have, so endoplasmic reticulum, they can be both small and rough endoplasmic reticulum, and the difference is that the rough endoplasmic reticulum, they have the presence of ribosomes on their surface, whereas the smooth one has the absence of ribosomes. Okay, there's lysosome, we have the centrosome, we have the new part that we can look at here, the nuclear membrane, we have the nucleolus. So these are some of the parts that you can see under the detailed. Even here we have the nucleolus, we have the ribosomes, we have the rough endoplasmic reticulum, we have the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, we have the Golgi bodies, we have the mitochondria, we have the cytoskeleton. So the parts that we are going to look at now, let us look at now the parts, the functions of the parts of the cell. Okay? So functions of cell parts. What are some of the functions? From where we are coming from, we've seen that a cell has nucleus. So a cell has nucleus. So there's a nucleus in a cell. All these parts, let us look at the functions of these parts of cells. So the first part of the cell that we are going to look at is the nucleus. What is the function of the nucleus? What is the function of the nucleus? The nucleus is responsible for controlling cells' activities. So whatever activities that are taking place or that take place in a cell, they are controlled by nucleus or by a nucleus. So the nucleus controls cells' activity. So if you find a question, which part of the cell, or maybe you are given a diagram and there are parts labeled there, and then they ask you which part controls the cell's activities, and the part is the nucleus. Okay? In addition to that, it also stores genetic information. So, stores genetic information. These are some of the functions of a nucleus. What about the cell membrane? Let us now look at the cell membrane. So the cell membrane, in terms of makeup, it is made up of lipids and proteins. Okay? So in the case you are asked the question, what is the makeup of the cell membrane? So the cell membrane is made up of lipids and proteins. And the function is just to control the entry and the exit of the materials. It's selectively permeable. So, controls the materials that goes in and out of a cell. That is to say, the cell membrane is selectively permeable. This means that it allows some substance, at the same time it does not allow other substance to pass through it. How is it then selectively permeable? So, smaller substances are able to go through, such as oxygen, carbon dioxide. But if you have large substances, large molecules, they are not able to pass through, and hence being selectively permeable. So those that are small in size, they go in easily and of course come out easily. But those that are large in size, they are not allowed to go in. What about the cytoplasm? So the cytoplasm, you know that is a large part of the cell. If we are to look at this cell, the cytoplasm is the whole of this part. So the whole of this is the cytoplasm. This cytoplasm, even in a cell, in an animal cell, is jelly-like. It's jelly-like. Okay? Jelly. It's jelly-like. Okay? It contains fluid. What is the component really of the cell, or the cell cytoplasm? So it contains the dissolved substances such as proteins, salt, and contain cell structure called organelles. So that is where all cell activities takes place. That is where all the cell's activities take place. So remember, or bear in mind that in the nucleus control the cell's activity, and the nucleus is found in the cytoplasm. And therefore in the cytoplasm, that is where, since that is where the nucleus is found, which controls cells' activities within the cytoplasm, in the cytoplasm, that is where cells' activities take place. So the cytoplasm simply, that is where cells' activities take place. Okay? 3 parts of the cell are collectively called the protoplasm. Okay? You might find a question such as which part of the cell is part of the protoplasm. So 3 parts, we have the cell membrane, those that are called protoplasm or collectively called protoplasm, cell membrane, nucleus, and cytoplasm. These 3 parts of the cell are collectively called protoplasm. Okay? Protoplasm is just a living part of the cell. Okay? Living part of the cell. So the parts of the cell that makes up the living part of the cell, we have the cell membrane, the nucleus, and the cytoplasm. These makes up what we call the protoplasm. Okay? So now, let us proceed now to look at the mitochondria. So mitochondria, plural is called mitochondrion. Plural is mitochondria. Mitochondria is plural. So if a lot of them, which means mitochondria. So what is a mitochondrion? So in a cell, the mitochondrion or the mitochondrions are rod-like structure. So if you are to look at this here, this is the mitochondrion. They are rod-like structure. Okay, sausage-like, if you want. So a mitochondrion, in terms of, if I were to draw it in terms of the structure, it's like this one. So it's a rod-like, and then inside, okay, it's a mitochondrion. Now, what is the function of the mitochondrion? In a cell, so the mitochondrion, that is where respiration takes place in a cell. It's a place of respiration. That is where. Okay, so let us look at the ribosomes as part of the cell. So what are ribosomes? So ribosomes, in terms of shape, they are small in size. They are small in size and circular, and they are normally found suspended inside the cytoplasm. They can be found freely suspended or on the surface of the ER, rough endoplasmic reticulum. That is where they are found. So they are normally found in the cytoplasm of a cell. Equally here, they are there, but I'm sure they are too small. So now, what is the function of the ribosomes? So ribosomes, like we said, they are small in size, and therefore their functions, that is where protein synthesis takes place. That is where protein synthesis takes place. So that is where protein synthesis takes place. It takes place in the ribosomes. Okay? What about the endoplasmic reticulum? Let us look at the endoplasmic reticulum. So the endoplasmic reticulum, we said there are two. We have the rough. So for the rough endoplasmic reticulum, ER, so there are two of them. We have rough, for the endoplasmic reticulum, we have two. That is rough, ER, R for rough, endoplasmic reticulum, and the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. What is the function of the endoplasmic reticulum? So normally endoplasmic reticulum are membrane, network of membrane. By description you can say network of membrane. So network of membrane, what do the endoplasmic reticulum do? What is the function? So transportation, so the function of the endoplasmic reticulum, we're looking at transportation of substances. So transportation of substances within, within the cytoplasm. So the transportation of these substances only occur within the cytoplasm. But we can be specific with smooth endoplasmic reticulum. For smooth endoplasmic reticulum normally transport lipids within the cytoplasm. So smooth endoplasmic reticulum transport lipids. What about Golgi bodies or Golgi apparatus? So one is called Golgi body, okay, Golgi body. Then a group of them, like you can see here, these are called Golgi apparatus. Golgi apparatus because they are found piled like this, so making the Golgi apparatus. But if I were to look at one, it's called the Golgi body. Okay, so the Golgi body, what is its function? What is the function of the Golgi body? So the function is to modify, so it modify and carry proteins from the site of synthesis. So modify and carry proteins. Proteins, we are talking proteins such as enzymes. So here, modify and carry proteins, example enzymes, from the site of synthesis to the site of reaction. The site of reaction. You know that enzymes speed up the rate of chemical reaction. So therefore, they are needed in places where the reaction is taking place, and therefore they are carried by the Golgi bodies. What about the chloroplast? What is the function of the chloroplast? So the chloroplast, should take note that as we discussed, the chloroplast is only found in plant cell. So this is a good diagram that we can look at, a simple one, which shows clearly the chloroplast. So the chloroplast are these oval-shaped. These represented by the letter green. These are chloroplasts. So the chloroplast in shape is oval, helps during the process of photosynthesis. Okay, so we can say the chloroplast helps or let me say enables the plant to carry out photosynthesis. So enables the plant to carry out photosynthesis. So now the sap contain, the vacuole contain sap or cell sap. The cell sap is made up of salt, water and sugar. Okay? So the concentration of the vacuole plays an important role in the movement of water in plants. So the vacuole plays an important role in movement of water in plants. Okay, that is a function that we can look at, and of course we are going to look at how it does that or how that happened due to difference in concentration as we start looking at the movement of water. The last part that we can look at is the cell wall. Okay? The cell wall, we said also, is only found in plant cell. Now, what is the function of the cell wall? The cell wall, if you are to look at the plant, is the outermost part. If you are to look at a plant cell, it's the outermost part of a plant cell. This outermost, the part that is outside the plant cell, is what we call the cell wall. What is its function? What is the function of a cell wall? A cell wall protects a plant cell, from mechanical damage. You might even find the questions as we start looking at cells, which part of the plant cell protect, or which part of the cell protect it from mechanical damage. So it is the cell wall, prevent the cell from mechanical damage. The other function we can look at, prevent the cell from bursting. Prevent the cell from bursting due to excessive intake of water. So the cell becomes turgid instead. So it is able to withstand pressure. So prevent the cell from bursting when it takes a lot of water. We want to start tuitions in sciences, social sciences. You can still get in touch. We have all the subjects on offer. So you can still get in touch using the lines below. Get in touch. We can start preparing you for your exams, even catching up. Those who just want to catch up, those who are writing exams, we can still